In the heart of the ancient kingdom of Valdoria, where mountain peaks pierce clouds and castle walls have witnessed 1,000 years of secrets, a single moment would change everything. Captain Marcus Reed had served the royal family for 15 years, protecting their lives with his own. But on this cold February morning, as he discovered Princess Elena trembling in the castle's hidden passage with bruises on her small arms, he realized the greatest threat to the crown might come from within the very walls he had sworn to defend. The young princess's whispered words would echo through the kingdom. He said no one would believe me because I'm just a child. But Marcus Reed was about to prove that some protectors refuse to stay silent, even when the truth threatens to topple a throne. What happens when loyalty to the crown conflicts with protecting an innocent child? In Valdoria, this question would ignite a royal crisis that would test the very foundations of honor, duty, and justice. The morning mist clung to Valdoria Castle like ghostly fingers, wrapping around its ancient towers and battlements. Captain Marcus Reed pulled his dark cloak tighter as he made his rounds through the lower corridors. After 15 years of service to the royal family, these stone passages felt as familiar as his own heartbeat. Every shadow, every echo, every creak of the old timbers told him stories of the castle's moods. Marcus had dedicated his life to protecting King Alexander and his family. The king was a fair ruler, beloved by his people, though the weight of the crown had aged him beyond his 45 years. Queen Isabella was graceful and kind, always ensuring the castle staff felt valued. Their eldest son, Prince William, showed promise as a future king, training daily with the kingdom's finest knights. But it was 8-year-old Princess Elena who held a special place in Marcus's protective heart. Elena was a bright child with curious green eyes and golden hair that caught sunlight like spun silk. She had a habit of exploring every corner of the vast castle, often appearing in the most unexpected places, with questions about everything from the kitchen gardens to the ancient tapestries. Marcus often found himself assigned specifically to watch over her during her adventures, a duty he cherished. This particular morning felt different. As Marcus approached the east wing, where the royal chambers were located, he noticed an unusual quietness. The servants who normally bustled about their morning duties were absent from this section. Even the usual sounds of Princess Elena's morning lessons with her tutor were missing. Something was wrong. Marcus quickened his pace, his hand instinctively moving to the sword at his side. Years of military training had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct now screamed danger. As he rounded the corner leading to the princess's quarters, he heard it, a soft, muffled sound that made his blood run cold. Someone was crying. Following the sound, Marcus discovered it came from behind a tapestry that concealed one of the castle's many hidden passages. These secret corridors had been built centuries ago as escape routes during sieges, but now they served mainly as shortcuts for servants or hiding places for children playing games. Carefully, Marcus pulled aside the heavy fabric and peered into the narrow passage. There, huddled against the cold stone wall, was Princess Elena. But this wasn't the confident, curious child he knew. This little girl was trembling, her usually bright eyes red from crying, and her small arms wrapped protectively around herself. "Princess Elena," Marcus called softly, not wanting to frighten her further. "What are you doing in here?" The child looked up with startled eyes, as if she hadn't expected to be found. For a moment she seemed ready to flee deeper into the passage, but then recognition crossed her face. "Captain Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I was hiding." "Hiding from what, Your Highness?" Marcus asked gently, crouching down to meet her at eye level. It was then that he noticed something that made his protective instincts roar to life. On Princess Elena's left arm, partially hidden by the sleeve of her nightgown, were dark marks. Even in the dim light of the passage, Marcus could see they were bruises, finger-shaped bruises, that could only have come from someone gripping the child's arm too tightly. Marcus felt a surge of anger unlike anything he had experienced in years. Someone had hurt this innocent child. Someone who had been close enough to lay hands on a princess of Valdoria. But he forced himself to remain calm. Eleanor was frightened enough already. "Princess," he said, in the gentlest voice he could manage, "can you tell me how you got those marks on your arm?" Elena's eyes widened with fear, and she quickly pulled her sleeve down to cover the bruises. "I fell," she said, quickly. "I was running and I fell down the stairs." But Marcus had seen too many injuries in his military career to be fooled. Those were not marks from a fall. Someone had grabbed this child hard enough to leave finger-shaped bruises, and the thought filled him with protective rage. "Eleanor," he said, using her name without the royal title to make her feel more comfortable. You know you can tell me anything, don't you? My job is to keep you safe, and I can't do that if I don't know what's happening. The little girl looked at him with eyes that seemed far too old for her. 8 years. In that moment, Marcus realized that Princess Elena was carrying a burden no child should ever have to bear. He said no one would believe me, Elena whispered, so quietly that Marcus had to lean closer to hear her. He said no one would believe me because I'm just a child, and he's important. Marcus felt his heart sink. The use of he meant this wasn't an accident or rough play with other children. Some man, had deliberately hurt Princess Elena and then threatened her into silence. Who said that to you? Marcus asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Elena's small body began to shake again. I can't tell you. He said terrible things would happen if I told anyone. He said father wouldn't love me anymore if he knew what I did wrong. The manipulation in those words made Marcus's hands clench into fists. Someone had not only physically hurt this child, but had also convinced her that she was somehow to blame. It was a classic pattern that Marcus had unfortunately seen before, though never involving someone so young or so close to his protection. Elena, listen to me very carefully, Marcus said, placing his hands gently on her small shoulders. Nothing that happened to you is your fault. Nothing. And your father will always love you, no matter what anyone tells you. You are brave and good, and you deserve to be safe. Fresh tears began to roll down Elena's cheeks. But what if he's right? What if father gets angry at me? Your father loves you more than anything in this world, Marcus assured her. And so does your mother. They would want to know if someone hurt you, because their job, like mine, is to protect you. For several long moments, they sat in the hidden passage while Elena wrestled with her fear and confusion. Marcus could see the internal battle playing out across her young features. Finally, she took a shaky breath. It was during my evening lessons yesterday, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. My tutor sent me to get a book from the library. Lord Roderick was there. Marcus's blood turned to ice. Lord Roderick Ashford was one of King Alexander's most trusted advisors, a man who had served the crown for over a decade. He was married to Lady Margaret, one of Queen Isabella's closest friends, and was often present at court functions. The thought that this respected nobleman might be hurting the royal children was almost too horrible to contemplate. What happened in the library, Elena?
He was looking at some papers, and when I came in, he seemed angry about something.
He asked me what I was doing there, and when I told him about the book, he said I was lying. He said I was spying on him. Elena's voice grew even smaller. I tried to explain, but he grabbed my arm really hard and said that little girls who spy get punished. Marcus felt sick. The bruises on Elena's arm matched perfectly with what she was describing, but he needed to know everything to protect her properly. Did he hurt you in any other way? He asked gently. Elena shook her head quickly, but then paused. He said that if I told anyone about seeing him in the library or about our conversation, that he would tell father I was a liar and a troublemaker. He said father would send me away to a convent and I would never see my family again. The cruelty of using a child's deepest fears against her made Marcus want to find Lord Roderick immediately. But he knew he had to be smart about this. A direct confrontation could backfire and potentially put Elena in more danger. Elena, you did the right thing by telling me, Marcus said firmly. And I promise you that Lord Roderick will never hurt you again. But I need you to help me keep you safe. Can you do that? The little princess nodded, though her eyes still held traces of fear. First, you're never to be alone with Lord Roderick again. If you see him coming, you find me or another guard immediately. Second, if anyone at all, ever hurts you or makes you uncomfortable, you tell me right away. And third, you must never believe anyone who tells you that your parents don't love you, because that's simply not true. What are you going to do? Elena asked. Marcus considered his options carefully. Going directly to the king with accusations against one of his most trusted advisors would require absolute proof. But Elena's safety had to come first. I'm going to make sure you're protected while I investigate what happened, Marcus told her. And Elena, this isn't your fault. Lord Roderick is the one who did something wrong, not you. As they emerged from the hidden passage, Marcus's mind was already working through the implications. If Lord Roderick was willing to hurt a royal child to keep some secret, what other crimes might he be capable of? And how could Marcus protect Elena while building a case that would stand up to royal scrutiny? The morning sun was now streaming through the castle windows, but for Marcus, the day had taken on a much darker tone. He had dedicated his life to protecting the royal family from external threats, but he had never imagined that the greatest danger might come from within their own trusted circle. As he escorted Princess Elena back toward her chambers, Marcus made a silent vow. Whatever Lord Roderick was hiding, whatever game he was playing, it would end now. No one, no matter how trusted or powerful, would harm this innocent child under his protection. The game was about to begin, and Marcus Reed intended to win. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the castle courtyard, as Marcus Reed stood at his post near the main hall, but his mind was entirely focused on the morning's revelation. Princess Elena's bruised arm and frightened words replayed in his thoughts like a haunting melody. He had spent the past several hours discreetly observing Lord Roderick's movements and behavior, trying to piece together a strategy that would protect Elena while building an irrefutable case. Lord Roderick Ashford appeared to be conducting business as usual. The tall, distinguished nobleman with greying temples and calculating blue eyes moved through the castle with his typical air of authority. He attended the morning council meeting with King Alexander, reviewed trade agreements in his office, and even shared pleasantries with Queen Isabella during the midday meal. To any casual observer, he was the same trusted advisor he had always been. But Marcus now watched him with new eyes, looking for any signs of the cruelty that Elena had described. He noticed things he had perhaps overlooked before. The way Roderick's jaw tightened when children ran through the corridors, how his smile never quite reached his eyes when speaking to the younger servants, and most tellingly, how he seemed to avoid being alone with any of the royal children since that morning. Marcus had also spent time researching Roderick's background more thoroughly. The lord had come to court 12 years ago, recommended by a cousin who served in the Northern Territories. His rise through the ranks had been steady and impressive, gaining King Alexander's trust through seemingly sound counsel and unwavering loyalty. He had married Lady Margaret Fairfax 3 years later, though the marriage had produced no children of their own. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus received word that Princess Elena was safely attending her art lessons with Mistress Sarah, an elderly woman who had taught 3 generations of Valdorian royalty. Marcus had specifically requested that Elena's schedule be modified to ensure she was never alone, and always with trusted companions. The child had seemed relieved by this arrangement, though she still jumped at unexpected sounds. It was during this quiet monitoring period that Marcus noticed something unusual. A young kitchen maid named Lily had been trying to catch his attention for the better part of an hour, hovering near the hallway entrance and glancing nervously in his direction. Lily was perhaps 16 years old, with brown hair always neatly braided, and a reputation for being hard-working and honest. She had never approached any of the guards before, which made her behavior particularly noteworthy. Finally, Marcus approached her. "Is there something you need, Lily?" The girl's eyes darted around nervously before she spoke in a hushed tone. "Captain, could I speak with you privately? It's about Princess Elena." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Of course. Follow me." He led her to a small alcove near the chapel, away from the main flow of castle traffic. Lily's hands were trembling as she twisted them in her apron, and Marcus could see she was struggling with some internal debate. "What about Princess Elena?" he asked gently. Lily took a shaky breath. "Yesterday evening, I was taking fresh linens to the guest chambers on the 3rd floor. I heard voices coming from the library, and one of them sounded upset. When I passed by the door, I could see inside through the crack, and I saw Lord Roderick grab Princess Elena's arm very roughly." Marcus's heart began to pound. Here was an independent witness to exactly what Elena had described. "What else did you see or hear?" The princess looked frightened, and Lord Roderick was speaking to her in a harsh whisper. "I couldn't make out all the words, but I heard him say something about consequences and keeping quiet." The little princess started to cry, and he shook her arm again. Lily's voice grew stronger as she continued. "It made me feel sick to watch, but I was too scared to intervene. Lord Roderick is so powerful, and I'm just a kitchen maid." "You did the right thing by telling me now," Marcus assured her. "Did you see what happened after that?" Lord Roderick released her arm and pointed toward the door. Princess Elena ran out crying, holding her arm. Lord Roderick stayed in the library for a long time after that, pacing back and forth like he was angry about something. This corroborated Elena's account perfectly, but Marcus needed to understand the full scope of what they were dealing with. "Lily, has Lord Roderick ever acted inappropriately toward you or any of the other servants?" The girl's face darkened. "There have been rumors among the staff for years, nothing anyone could prove, but several of the younger maids have complained about the way he looks at them, or how he finds excuses to touch their shoulders or hands. Most of us try to avoid being alone with him if we can help it. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. If Roderick had a pattern of inappropriate behavior, Elena might not be his only victim. The man could be a predator who had been operating under the protection of his position for years. "I need you to do something for me, Lily," Marcus said carefully. "I want you to quietly ask the other maids if anyone has had uncomfortable experiences with Lord Roderick. Don't make it obvious that you're investigating, just casual conversations among friends. Can you do that?" Lily nodded earnestly. "Yes, Captain. We all care about Princess Elena, and if Lord Roderick has been hurting her," she didn't need to finish the sentence. After Lily left, Marcus realized he was facing a more complex situation than he had initially thought. If Roderick was indeed a predator, he had likely been very careful about choosing victims who wouldn't be believed or who were too frightened to speak up. A royal princess, however, was a much riskier target, which suggested either escalating boldness or desperation on Roderick's part. Marcus decided he needed to examine the library where the incident had occurred. Making his way to the third floor, he found the library empty in the late afternoon light. It was a substantial room lined with books from floor to ceiling, with several reading tables and comfortable chairs scattered throughout. Large windows provided natural light during the day, but the room also had numerous dark corners and alcoves where someone could work privately. Moving to the area where Lily had described seeing the incident, Marcus tried to reconstruct what had happened. Elena had come to get a book for her lessons, a perfectly normal request. She would have entered through the main door, probably making some noise that would have alerted Roderick to her presence. But what had he been doing that was so sensitive he couldn't risk a child witnessing it? Marcus began systematically searching the area where Roderick had been standing. The desk in that corner was typically used for reviewing legal documents or correspondence. Looking more closely, Marcus noticed something unusual. Small burn marks on the stone floor near the fireplace, as if papers had been hastily burned. The fireplace wasn't typically used during the day in February, unless something needed to be destroyed urgently. Hidden behind one of the massive legal volumes, Marcus found something even more interesting. A small piece of parchment that had apparently been overlooked in whatever hasty cleanup had occurred. The fragment contained only a few words in what appeared to be Roderick's handwriting. Northern Mines. Agreement void. Gold shipment delayed. Marcus's military training had taught him to recognize the significance of such fragments. The Northern Mines were one of Valdoria's most valuable resources, and any agreements involving them would be matters of highest state security. If Roderick had been conducting unauthorized business related to the mines, it could constitute treason. As the pieces began to fall into place, Marcus realized that Elena had likely witnessed Roderick destroying evidence of some illegal activity. The Lord's violent reaction made sense if he thought the princess had seen something that could expose his crimes. But what exactly was he trying to hide? Marcus carefully pocketed the parchment fragment and left the library, his mind racing with possibilities. He needed more evidence before approaching King Alexander, but he also needed to ensure Elena's continued safety. If Roderick suspected that the princess had spoken to anyone about what she witnessed, he might become desperate enough to take drastic action. That evening, as the castle settled into its nighttime routine, Marcus made his rounds with extra vigilance. He had arranged for additional guards to be stationed near the royal family's quarters, though he had done so subtly to avoid raising alarm. Princess Elena had been safely tucked into bed by her governess, with strict instructions that she was not to leave her chambers without escort. It was nearly midnight when Marcus encountered Lord Roderick in one of the castle's less frequented corridors. The nobleman appeared startled to see him, though he quickly composed himself. "Captain Reed," Roderick said with his usual polished demeanor. "Working late this evening?" "Security never sleeps, my lord," Marcus replied evenly, studying the other man's face for any tells. "How was your day?" "Quite productive, thank you. Though I must say, the children seem particularly energetic lately. Princess Elena nearly knocked me down earlier when she came running through the east corridor." Roderick's tone was casual, but Marcus caught the underlying message. He was establishing a cover story for any interaction with Elena. "Children can be unpredictable," Marcus agreed. "That's why we keep such close watch over them. Every bump, every bruise, every tear, we investigate thoroughly to ensure their safety." Something flickered in Roderick's eyes, and Marcus knew his message had been received. The two men regarded each other for a moment in tense silence, each taking the measure of the other. "Well," Roderick said finally, "I should let you get back to your duties. Good evening, Captain." As Roderick walked away, Marcus noticed something that confirmed his suspicions. The Lord's right hand bore fresh scratches across the knuckles. the kind that might occur if someone had roughly grabbed a child who tried to pull away. The game was definitely afoot now. Roderick knew that Marcus suspected something, and Marcus knew that Roderick was hiding criminal activities. But with a child's safety hanging in the balance, Marcus realized he needed to move quickly to gather the proof he needed while keeping Elena protected. Tomorrow, he would begin the delicate process of building a case against one of the kingdom's most trusted advisors. The stakes couldn't be higher. If he was wrong, he could destroy an innocent man's reputation and his own career. But if he was right, he might be the only thing standing between Princess Elena and a dangerous predator who was willing to use violence to protect his secrets. As Marcus completed his rounds and settled in for what he knew would be a sleepless night, he found himself thinking about the oath he had taken when he became captain of the guard. He had sworn to protect the royal family with his life, but he had never imagined that fulfilling that oath might require him to investigate and expose someone within their own inner circle. The castle slept around him, but Marcus remained vigilant, knowing that the real battle for Princess Elena's safety was just beginning. The next morning brought unexpected developments that would accelerate Marcus's investigation beyond what he had planned. As dawn broke over Valdoria Castle, Lily found him in the armory and delivered news that made his blood run cold. "Captain Reed," she whispered urgently, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "I spoke with the other maids as you requested, and what I learned is worse than we thought." Marcus set down the sword he had been inspecting and gave her his full attention. "Tell me everything." 3 of the girls have had uncomfortable encounters with Lord Roderick. Sarah from the laundry said he cornered her in a storage room 6 months ago and made inappropriate comments about her appearance. When she tried to leave, he blocked her path and said she should be grateful for the attention of a nobleman. She managed to escape when someone else approached, but she was too frightened to report it. Marcus felt his jaw clench. "What about the others?" Emma from the kitchen said Lord Roderick has been finding excuses to touch her hands and shoulders when she serves him meals. When she pulled away, he told her she was being ungrateful and that servant girls should appreciate any kindness from their betters. And most disturbing of all, Lily paused, her face pale with worry. "Go on." "Mary, one of the younger chambermaids, told me that 2 weeks ago, Lord Roderick asked her to bring extra blankets to his quarters late at night. When she arrived, he was wearing only his nightclothes and tried to pull her into the room. She broke free and ran. But the next day he threatened to have her dismissed for poor service if she spoke about it to anyone." Marcus felt sick. The pattern was clear. Roderick was a predator who had been systematically targeting vulnerable servants who had no power to defend themselves. Princess Elena represented a dramatic escalation in his behavior, suggesting neither growing desperation or increasing boldness. "There's something else, Captain," Lily continued. Mary mentioned that when she escaped from Lord Roderick's chambers, she heard him muttering angrily about complications and nosy children. This was just a few days before the incident with Princess Elena. The timeline was becoming clearer. Something had been building pressure on Roderick, making him more reckless and dangerous. Marcus needed to find out what that pressure was before it exploded in a way that could harm Elena or other innocent people. "Lily, I need you to tell Sarah, Emma, and Mary that they need to be extra careful around Lord Roderick. They should never be alone with him, and if he approaches any of them, they should immediately find other people to be around. Can you do that without alerting anyone else?"
"Yes, Captain."
"We've already been looking out for each other, but we'll be even more careful now." After Lily left, Marcus realized he needed to accelerate his investigation. With multiple victims and escalating behavior, waiting to gather more evidence could put more people at risk. But he also knew that accusations against Lord Roderick would require absolute proof to be believed by King Alexander. Marcus decided to take a calculated risk. Rather than continuing to investigate alone, he would bring in one trusted ally who could help him navigate the political complexities of the situation. Sir Thomas Blackwood, the castle's master of arms and Marcus's closest friend, had served alongside him for over a decade. Thomas was not only skilled in combat, but also had an excellent understanding of court politics and the king's temperament. Finding Thomas in the training yard instructing young knights, Marcus waited until the lesson concluded before approaching him. "Thomas, I need to speak with you privately about a matter of utmost importance to the royal family's safety." Sir Thomas, a stocky man with greying hair and intelligent brown eyes, immediately recognized the gravity in Marcus's tone. "Of course. My chambers?" Once they were safely behind closed doors, Marcus laid out everything he had discovered about Lord Roderick's behavior toward Princess Elena and the servant girls. Thomas listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly grim as the details unfolded. "This is serious beyond measure," Thomas said when Marcus finished. "But accusing one of the king's most trusted advisors will require overwhelming evidence. Roderick has been instrumental in several important trade negotiations, and the king values his counsel highly." "I know the political risks," Marcus replied, "but I also know what I saw in Princess Elena's eyes. She's terrified, Thomas. And if Roderick is willing to physically assault a royal child to protect whatever secret he's hiding, he's capable of much worse." Thomas was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. "What do you need from me?" "I need help investigating Roderick's private activities. That parchment fragment I found suggests he's involved in something related to the Northern Mines. If we can prove he's been engaged in treasonous activities, it will provide context for his violent reaction to Elena's presence in the library." "The Northern Mines," Thomas mused. "There have been some irregularities in the gold shipment reports lately. Nothing dramatic enough to raise alarms, but small discrepancies that the Treasury has been trying to reconcile. If Roderick has been skimming from those shipments, it would explain why he was burning documents and why he reacted so violently to being witnessed." Marcus finished. "Can you access the mine reports without raising suspicion?" "I can request them as part of a routine security review. If there's evidence of theft or fraud, we'll find it." Thomas paused. "But Marcus, if we're right about this, we're not just dealing with a predator, we're dealing with a traitor. That makes him infinitely more dangerous." As if summoned by their conversation, a knock came at Thomas's door. When he opened it, they found a young page with a message that made both men's blood run cold. "Sir Thomas, Captain Reed," the boy said breathlessly. "King Alexander requests your immediate presence in his private study. He says it's a matter of urgent concern regarding Princess Elena." Marcus and Thomas exchanged worried glances. Had Roderick somehow learned about their investigation and moved to discredit them first? Or had something happened to Elena despite Marcus's precautions? They made their way quickly to the king's private study, a richly appointed room where Alexander conducted his most confidential business. King Alexander stood with his back to the door, staring out the window at the courtyard below. His shoulders were tense with obvious stress. "Your Majesty," Marcus said as they entered, "you requested our presence." The king turned, and Marcus was shocked to see the anguish in the man's eyes. King Alexander looked as though he had aged years in the past day. "Marcus, Thomas," the king began, his voice heavy with emotion. "I need to discuss something that has come to my attention regarding my daughter's well-being." Marcus felt his heart stop. Did the king know about Roderick's assault on Elena? If so, how had he learnt about it? "This morning," King Alexander continued, "Elena came to me in tears. She told me that someone had hurt her and threatened her, but she was too frightened to give me details. She said she had already told someone she trusted, and when I pressed her, she mentioned your name, Marcus." Relief flooded through Marcus, followed immediately by renewed concern. Elena had been brave enough to seek her father's protection, but she was still too frightened to name her attacker directly. "Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully, "Princess Elena did speak with me about an incident that concerned me greatly. I was investigating the matter to ensure I had complete information before bringing it to your attention." "What kind of incident?" The king's voice was dangerously quiet. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would determine not only his own fate but possibly Elena's safety as well. "Your Majesty, someone grabbed Princess Elena roughly enough to leave bruises on her arm. This person also threatened her into silence, telling her that no one would believe her because she's a child." King Alexander's face darkened with rage. "Who dared to lay hands on my daughter?" This was the moment of truth. Marcus knew that once he spoke Roderick's name, there would be no going back. But looking at the king's anguished face, he realized that Elena's safety was more important than any political considerations. "Based on Princess Elena's account and corroborating witness testimony, I believe the perpetrator was Lord Roderick Ashford." The silence that followed was deafening. King Alexander stood completely still for what felt like an eternity, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and something that looked like betrayal. "Lord Roderick," the king said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "One of my most trusted advisors, the man I've relied on for counsel on matters of state for over a decade." "Your Majesty," Thomas interjected gently, "Captain Reed has been conducting a thorough investigation. There appeared to be multiple incidents involving Lord Roderick's inappropriate behavior, and evidence suggesting other criminal activities as well." Marcus quickly outlined everything they had discovered: the servant girl's experiences, the burned documents in the library, the suspicious parchment fragment, and the irregularities in the mining reports. With each detail, King Alexander's expression grew darker. When Marcus finished his report, the king walked to his desk and sat down heavily in his chair. For several minutes, he simply stared at his hands, processing the magnitude of what he had been told. "My own daughter," he said finally, "terrorized by someone I trusted implicitly, someone who has sat at my table, advised me on matters of war and peace, and pretended to care about my family's well-being." "Your Majesty," Marcus said, "I believe Lord Roderick became desperate when Princess Elena accidentally witnessed him destroying evidence of his crimes. His violent reaction suggests that whatever he's hiding could mean exile or execution if exposed." King Alexander looked up with eyes that burned with royal fury. "Then we will expose it. Thomas, I want you to immediately secure all records related to the northern mines. Marcus, I want Lord Roderick under discreet surveillance starting now, and I want a complete investigation into every aspect of his activities over the past 5 years." "What about Princess Elena's safety?" Marcus asked. "Elena will never be alone with Lord Roderick again. In fact, he will never be alone with any child in this castle again, but I will not act against him based solely on accusations, no matter how credible. I want absolute proof of his crimes before I move for justice." The king stood and moved to the window again. "Gentlemen, if what you suspect is true, then I have harbored a traitor and predator in the heart of my kingdom for years. The thought that my trust may have enabled him to harm innocent people." His voice trailed off. "Your Majesty couldn't have known," Thomas said quietly. "Predators like Roderick are skilled at maintaining facades of respectability." "That may be true," King Alexander replied, "but it doesn't absolve me of responsibility for stopping him now. We have perhaps 48 hours before he realizes we're investigating him seriously. I want answers before then." As Marcus and Thomas left the king's study, both men understood the gravity of their mission. They weren't just gathering evidence anymore, they were racing against time to expose a dangerous criminal before he could either escape justice or harm more innocent people. The game had moved to a new level, and the stakes had never been higher. Princess Elena's courage in speaking to her father had opened the door to justice, but now it was up to Marcus and Thomas to walk through that door and ensure that Lord Roderick Ashford could never hurt another child again. The hunt for truth had begun in earnest, and Marcus intended to see it through to the very end. The investigation moved with swift precision over the next 36 hours. Sir Thomas had managed to secure the mining records under the guise of a routine security audit, and what they revealed was far worse than anyone had imagined. Lord Roderick hadn't just been skimming gold from the northern mines, he had been systematically embezzling massive amounts over a period of 3 years, creating false reports and bribing officials to cover his tracks. Marcus stood in Thomas's chambers late on the second evening, surrounded by documents that painted a picture of elaborate fraud. The evidence was overwhelming, but what made it particularly damning was the discovery of correspondence hidden in Roderick's private quarters. The letters revealed that he had been selling mining information to Valdoria's enemies, compromising the kingdom's strategic advantages for personal gain. "Look at this," Thomas said, holding up a letter written in Roderick's hand. "He's been providing detailed reports about mine production, security measures, and transport routes to agents from the Blackstone Federation. The intelligence he's sold could have been used to plan raids or invasions." Marcus felt sick as he read through the treasonous correspondence. No wonder he reacted so violently when Elena stumbled upon him destroying evidence. If this information had been discovered during a routine audit, he would have faced execution for treason. And now we understand why his behavior has been escalating, Thomas added grimly. According to these dates, his Blackstone contacts were pressuring him for more detailed intelligence. He was probably destroying evidence of the most recent transactions when Elena walked in. The two men had also uncovered disturbing evidence of Roderick's predatory behavior. Hidden in a locked box in his chambers, they had found detailed notes about various castle staff members, including physical descriptions and personal information about their families and circumstances. The notes focused particularly on young women and included assessments of their vulnerability and likelihood to report inappropriate behavior. Most chilling of all was a recent entry about Princess Elena herself. Curious child, often unaccompanied. Potential witness to sensitive activities. Risk assessment required. "He was planning something," Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "This wasn't a spontaneous assault. He had been watching Elena, evaluating whether she posed a threat to his operations." "Thank God you found her when you did," Thomas replied. If he had decided she was too dangerous to his secrecy, neither man wanted to finish that thought. A soft knock at the door interrupted their grim deliberations. Thomas opened it to find King Alexander himself, accompanied only by his personal bodyguard. The king's presence was both unexpected and telling. He was taking personal command of the situation. "Your Majesty," both men said, bowing quickly. "Gentlemen," the king said, his voice carrying the weight of royal authority mixed with paternal fury. "I trust you have findings to report." Marcus and Thomas laid out everything they had discovered. As they presented each piece of evidence, the financial records, the treasonous correspondence, the predatory surveillance notes, King Alexander's expression grew progressively darker. By the time they finished, the king's hands were clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. 3 years, the king said finally, his voice deadly quiet. "For 3 years, this man sat at my council table, advised me on matters of state security, and pretended to care about my kingdom's welfare while systematically betraying everything we stand for." "Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully, "there's something else. We believe Lord Roderick suspects we're investigating him. He's been asking subtle questions about security procedures and making inquiries about guard rotations. We may not have much more time before he attempts to flee." King Alexander was quiet for a long moment, staring at the treasonous documents spread across Thomas's desk. When he spoke again, his voice carried the full authority of the crown. "Then we end this tonight. I will not allow this traitor another day of freedom in my kingdom, and I will not risk him harming another innocent person." The king turned to face both men directly. "I want Lord Roderick arrested immediately. But first, I want to confront him personally. He owes me an explanation for his betrayal, and he owes my daughter an accounting for the terror he inflicted upon her." "Your Majesty," Thomas said with concern, "confronting him directly could be dangerous." "If he's desperate enough, I appreciate your concern, Thomas, but I am still king of this realm. Some matters require royal judgment, and this is one of them." Alexander's tone brooked no argument. "However, I will not be foolish about it. Marcus, I want you and a full complement of guards present. If Lord Roderick makes any threatening move, you have my permission to use whatever force is necessary to protect everyone present." Marcus nodded grimly. "Where do you want to conduct the confrontation?" "The throne room," King Alexander replied. "If I am to pronounce judgment on a traitor, it will be done with the full ceremony and authority that such an action demands." Within an hour, everything was arranged. Lord Roderick had been summoned to the throne room under the pretense of an urgent consultation about northern border security. He had no reason to suspect that anything was amiss. Such late evening meetings were not uncommon when dealing with sensitive matters. Marcus positioned guards at all entrances to the throne room, ensuring that Roderick could neither escape nor call for help from any accomplices he might have within the castle. Additional guards were stationed throughout the castle to prevent any potential accomplices from interfering with the proceedings. As the appointed time approached, Marcus felt the familiar tension that preceded dangerous situations. But this wasn't a battle against external enemies. This was the exposure of rot that had been growing within the heart of the kingdom itself. Lord Roderick arrived precisely on time, dressed in his finest court attire and carrying a leather portfolio that presumably contained documents relevant to their supposed meeting. As he entered the throne room and saw King Alexander seated formally on the throne with the full regalia of royal authority, a brief flicker of confusion crossed his features. "Your Majesty," Roderick said with a respectful bow, "you summoned me for urgent consultation?" "Indeed I did, Lord Roderick," the king replied, his voice carrying an ominous formality, "though perhaps not for the reasons you might expect. Please, approach the throne." As Roderick walked forward, Marcus noticed the man's eyes scanning the room and taking note of the unusual number of guards present. The nobleman was intelligent enough to realize that something was wrong, but not yet desperate enough to make any sudden moves. "Lord Roderick Ashford," King Alexander began, rising from his throne with deliberate ceremony. "You have served as my advisor for 12 years. In that time, I have trusted you with matters of state security, granted you access to sensitive information, and welcomed you into my family's inner circle." "Your Majesty, it has been my honor to serve the crown," Roderick replied, but Marcus could see wariness creeping into his expression. "Then, perhaps you can explain to me," the king continued, his voice growing cold, "how serving the crown is compatible with selling intelligence to our enemies, embezzling from the royal treasury, and terrorizing my 8-year-old daughter." The transformation in Roderick's demeanor was instantaneous and telling. His carefully maintained mask of noble dignity dropped away, replaced by the calculating desperation of a cornered predator. His eyes darted towards the exits, quickly assessing his chances of escape. "I'm afraid I don't understand what your Majesty is suggesting," Roderick said, but his voice lacked conviction. King Alexander gestured to Thomas, who stepped forward with the damning correspondence. "These are letters in your handwriting, detailing mining operations and security procedures addressed to known agents of the Blackstone Federation. This is evidence of systematic embezzlement from the northern mines. And these..." The king's voice grew dangerously quiet. "Are surveillance notes you kept about castle staff, including detailed assessments of their vulnerability to your predatory advances." As the evidence was presented, all pretense fell away from Roderick's face. The man who had maintained such careful respectability for years suddenly looked exactly like what he was, a desperate criminal who had been caught. "Your Majesty," Roderick began, his voice taking on a wheedling tone, "there are explanations for everything. I was gathering intelligence about enemy activities, not selling information. The financial irregularities are due to accounting errors. And as for the staff notes, I was simply trying to ensure their welfare." "Enough," King Alexander said with royal command that echoed through the stone chamber. "Do not insult my intelligence with lies. But more importantly, do not think for one moment that I will tolerate what you did to Princess Elena." At the mention of Elena's name, something ugly flashed in Roderick's eyes. "The princess is a child with an active imagination. Children often misunderstand adult interactions. Children don't imagine finger-shaped bruises on their arms," Marcus interjected coldly, "and they don't imagine threats to keep them silent about what they witnessed." Roderick's gaze snapped to Marcus with pure hatred. "You!" he snarled. "This is all you're doing. Everything was manageable until you started meddling." "What was manageable?" King Alexander demanded. "Betraying your kingdom, stealing from the crown, assaulting innocent children? You don't understand the pressures involved," Roderick said, his composure completely gone now. "The Blackstone agents had information about my activities. They were threatening exposure unless I provided more detailed intelligence. I was trapped between impossible choices." "So you chose to compound treason with more treason," the king said with disgust. "And when that wasn't enough, you decided to silence potential witnesses through violence and intimidation." "Elena saw documents she shouldn't have seen," Roderick admitted, his voice growing more desperate. "I couldn't risk her mentioning it to anyone. I had to make sure she understood the importance of discretion. By grabbing her hard enough to bruise her arm and threatening to destroy her relationship with her family." Marcus stepped closer, his hand resting on his sword hilt. "By terrorizing a child to protect your criminal activities." Roderick suddenly seemed to realize the hopelessness of his situation. Surrounded by guards facing overwhelming evidence and confronted by a king whose fury was barely contained, he had nowhere left to run and no lies left to tell. "Lord Roderick Ashford," King Alexander pronounced with the full authority of the crown, "you stand accused of high treason against the Kingdom of Valdoria, systematic embezzlement of royal funds, and assault upon a member of the royal family. How do you answer these charges?" For a long moment, Roderick said nothing. Then, in a voice that had lost all its former polish and authority, he whispered, "I demand trial by combat." The ancient legal provision hung in the air like a challenge. Under Valdorian law, a nobleman accused of capital crimes could demand trial by combat, facing either the king's champion or, if the king chose, the king himself. King Alexander smiled grimly. "Lord Roderick, you have betrayed my trust, stolen from my treasury, endangered my kingdom's security, and terrorized my daughter. If you wish trial by combat, I will gladly accommodate that request." The king turned to Marcus. "Captain Reed, as you were the one who uncovered Lord Roderick's crimes and protected my daughter from his predations, would you do me the honor of serving as my champion in this matter?" Marcus bowed deeply, feeling the weight of justice settling on his shoulders. "Your Majesty, it would be my honor to see that justice is done." The trial by combat would take place at dawn, and Marcus knew that he would not merely be fighting for victory, he would be fighting for Princess Elena's peace of mind, for the safety of every innocent person Roderick had threatened, and for the honor of a kingdom that had been betrayed by one of its most trusted servants. The long night ahead would be spent in preparation, but Marcus felt no doubt about the outcome. Justice demanded satisfaction, and he intended to provide it. Dawn broke clear and cold over Valdoria Castle as Marcus Reed prepared for the trial by combat that would determine Lord Roderick's fate. In the castle's armory, he methodically donned his finest armor-polished steel that had served him faithfully through 15 years of service to the crown. Each piece carried the weight of memory and purpose, reminding him of the oath he had sworn to protect the royal family with his life. Sir Thomas stood beside him, checking each buckle and strap with the care of a brother-in-arms. Neither man spoke much. There was little need for words when the righteousness of their cause was so clear. This wasn't simply a matter of proving guilt or innocence. Lord Roderick had already confessed to his crimes. This was about justice, honor, and ensuring that the evil he represented could never again threaten innocent people. "The armor suits you," Thomas said quietly as he adjusted the final strap. "You look like exactly what you are, a champion of justice." Marcus tested the weight and balance of his sword, a blade that had been forged by Valdoria's finest smiths and blessed by the kingdom's priests. The familiar heft of the weapon in his hand brought calm focus to his mind. "Thomas," Marcus said, "if something happens to me today, nothing will happen to you," Thomas interrupted firmly. "You're fighting for Princess Elena, for every servant girl Roderick terrorized, and for the honor of this kingdom. Right and justice are on your side. But if something does happen," Marcus persisted, "promise me you'll continue to watch over Elena. She's been through trauma that no child should endure, and she'll need time and care to heal from it." "You have my word," Thomas replied solemnly. "But you're going to be the one watching over her, Marcus. Today you finish what you started when you found her hiding in that passage." As they made their way to the castle's main courtyard, where the combat would take place, Marcus felt the weight of attention from every person they passed. Word of Lord Roderick's arrest and the coming trial had spread throughout the castle, and the entire household, from the highest nobles to the lowest servants, had gathered to witness justice being done. The courtyard had been prepared according to ancient tradition. A circle 50 feet in diameter had been marked out with white stones, and temporary stands had been erected for the noble witnesses required by law. King Alexander sat in the place of honor, wearing his crown and royal robes, flanked by Queen Isabella and Prince William. Marcus noticed that Princess Elena was not present, a mercy, since no child should have to witness such violence, even in the cause of her own justice. Lord Roderick stood at the opposite side of the courtyard, also armed and armored. But Marcus could see the fear in his eyes despite his attempts to maintain composure. The nobleman had chosen a sword and shield for the combat, traditional weapons that might give him some advantage in defense. But Marcus could read the man's posture and movements. Roderick was a courtier who had learned swordplay as an ornamental skill, not a warrior who had tested his blade in actual combat. The royal herald stepped forward to proclaim the terms of combat according to Valdorian law. "Let all present bear witness that Lord Roderick Ashford stands accused of high treason, embezzlement, and assault upon a member of the royal family. He has confessed to these crimes, but demanded trial by combat as is his ancient right. Captain Marcus Reed stands as champion for the crown. Let the combat commence when the king gives the signal, and let the outcome be taken as God's judgment upon the accused." King Alexander rose from his throne and addressed both combatants. "Lord Roderick, you have betrayed every trust placed in you and brought dishonor to the very concept of noble service. Captain Reed, you have served with distinction and honor, uncovering treachery and protecting the innocent. Let justice be done." The king raised his hand, and the courtyard fell silent except for the sound of wind through the castle's banners. Marcus offered a brief prayer to whatever powers watched over those who fought for justice, then focused his entire being on the combat ahead. When the king's hand dropped, Lord Roderick immediately moved to take a defensive position, raising his shield and keeping his sword ready to parry. It was the choice of a man who hoped to survive rather than win, looking for an opportunity to strike when his opponent made a mistake. But Marcus had not spent 15 years protecting the royal family by making careless mistakes. Marcus advanced steadily, his sword held in a middle guard position that could quickly adapt to either attack or defense. He could see Roderick's eyes darting nervously, trying to read his intentions. The nobleman was already breathing hard, despite the fact that combat had barely begun. Fear was taking its toll on his stamina. The first exchange came when Roderick attempted a tentative thrust toward Marcus's side, hoping to land a quick wound that might slow his opponent down. Marcus easily parried the attack and responded with a controlled slash that forced Roderick to scramble backward. The difference in their skill levels was immediately apparent to every witness. "You don't have to die here, Roderick," Marcus called out as they circled each other. "Yield now, accept judgment, and face your crimes with whatever dignity you have left." "Never," Roderick snarled, though his voice shook with fear. "I won't give you the satisfaction." The nobleman launched a more aggressive assault, swinging his sword in wide arcs that betrayed his desperation. Marcus deflected each attack with minimal effort, waiting for the opening he knew would come. When Roderick overextended on a particularly wild swing, Marcus stepped inside his guard and delivered a pommel strike to the man's helmet that sent him staggering. Roderick recovered quickly but was now breathing even harder. Sweat was beginning to show despite the cold morning air, and his movements were becoming less controlled. Fear was becoming panic, and panic was the enemy of skill in combat. "This is for Princess Elena," Marcus said quietly, as he pressed forward with a series of precise attacks that forced Roderick to give ground steadily. "The girl means nothing," Roderick gasped as he desperately tried to maintain his defense. "She's just a child who got in the way of important business." The casual dismissal of Elena's suffering ignited something cold and deadly in Marcus's heart. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was about ensuring that a man who could speak so callously about terrorizing a child would never harm anyone again. Marcus's next attack was faster and more aggressive, his blade finding its way past Roderick's increasingly frantic defenses to score a cut across the nobleman's sword arm. Blood began to flow, and Roderick's grip on his weapon weakened noticeably. "And this is for every servant girl you threatened and intimidated," Marcus continued, following up with another precise strike that opened a wound on Roderick's leg. The nobleman stumbled and nearly fell, his breathing now coming in ragged gasps. The circle of white stones that marked the combat area was being stained with his blood, and everyone watching could see that the end was near. "Please," Roderick gasped, his earlier defiance crumbling into pathetic begging. "I can pay compensation. I have wealth hidden away. We can reach an arrangement." "There are no arrangements with treason," Marcus replied coldly, "and there is no price that can undo the terror you inflicted on an innocent child." Roderick made one final desperate attempt to turn the combat in his favor, dropping his shield and gripping his sword with both hands for a powerful overhead strike. But the maneuver was clumsy and telegraphed, the action of a man who had never faced life-or-death combat before. Marcus sidestepped the attack easily and brought his own blade up in a strike that caught Roderick in the side, penetrating his armor and driving deep into his body. The nobleman's sword fell from nerveless fingers as he collapsed to his knees, blood flowing freely from the mortal wound. "Lord Roderick Ashford," Marcus said in a voice that carried across the silent courtyard, "you are judged guilty by combat of all charges brought against you. May God have mercy on your soul." Roderick swayed on his knees, his face pale with approaching death. But even in his final moments, there was no remorse in his eyes, only frustrated rage at being caught and defeated. "This changes nothing," he whispered. "There are other arrangements. You haven't stopped anything." The words sent a chill through Marcus, but before he could demand clarification, Roderick collapsed forward and lay still. The trial by combat was over, and justice had been served according to ancient law. King Alexander rose from his throne and approached the fallen traitor. After confirming that Roderick was indeed dead, he turned to address the assembled witnesses. "Let all present bear witness that Lord Roderick Ashford has been judged guilty of high treason, embezzlement, and assault upon Princess Elena. His death serves as both punishment for his crimes and warning to any others who might contemplate betraying the trust placed in them." The king's voice carried clearly across the courtyard. "Let it also be known that Captain Marcus Reed has served as a true champion of justice and protector of the innocent." As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus found himself thinking about Roderick's final words. The suggestion that there were others and other arrangements implied that the dead nobleman's treachery might be part of a larger conspiracy. But those were concerns for another day. For now, justice had been done, and Princess Elena was safe. Later that afternoon, Marcus found himself in the castle gardens, where Princess Elena was playing under the watchful eye of her governess. When she saw him approaching, she ran to him with the innocent joy of a child who no longer had to fear the shadows. "Captain Marcus!" she called happily. "Father told me that the bad man can never hurt anyone again." "Is that true?" "Yes, Princess," Marcus replied gently, kneeling down to meet her eyes. "Lord Roderick will never hurt you or anyone else again." "You're safe now." Elena smiled brightly, but then her expression grew more serious. "Father also said that I was brave for telling the truth even when I was scared. He said that sometimes being brave means doing the right thing even when it's hard." "Your father is absolutely right," Marcus told her. "You were very brave, and because you found the courage to tell the truth, we were able to stop a bad man from hurting other people." "Will you still be my protector?" Elena asked with the directness that only children possess. "Always," Marcus promised. "That's what protectors do. We watch over the people we care about and make sure they're safe." As Princess Elena ran back to her games, Marcus reflected on the events of the past week. He had uncovered a traitor, exposed a predator, and ensured that justice was served. But more than that, he had kept faith with the oath he had sworn 15 years ago to protect the royal family with his life. The kingdom of Valdoria was safer now that Lord Roderick's treachery had been exposed and punished. But Marcus knew that vigilance was eternal, and there would always be new threats to guard against. For now, though, he was content to watch Princess Elena play in the sunshine, knowing that she could do so without fear. In the end, that was what being a protector truly meant, not just standing ready to face external enemies, but ensuring that innocent children could play in gardens without shadows of fear darkening their joy. Marcus had done his duty, and he would continue to do it for as long as he drew breath. The crown's shadow had been lifted, and the light of justice shone clear and bright over the kingdom of Valdoria.